Hello and welcome to Spinster's Library. I'm Claudia and today I'm reviewing the novel Cranford by Elizabeth Gaskell. This was published as a novel in 1853, but it had been published as a serialized novel the previous 2 years in Charles Dickens' magazine Household Words. And it is, like many sort of Victorian serialized novels, not so much a coherent story with a single arc like we know from modern novels, but more of a collection of connected stories. The first impression I got after reading a few chapters of this was that this is like a Victorian soap opera, in that it features really many of the elements that we know from soap operas on television. It has a lot of drama, it has a lot of sensation, it has some really quite incredible plot twists and turns, but it is also very slice of life, very everyday, very sort of, observing people in their homes as they go about their daily life kind of a thing. And the mix between the tragedy and the comedy, the everyday and the extraordinary, made this a really interesting and very unique read. So let me tell you about this. As the novel suggests, the book is set in the small town of Cranford, which is a kind of a little bit cut off from the rest of the country. And the book is narrated from the point of view of a visitor to Cranford, a woman who we don't really know much of at the beginning of the book. We don't even really know her name, although later we get to know that her name is Mary Smith. So Mary Smith narrates the story of the Cranford ladies, the circle of mostly widowed and unmarried women who rule the society of Cranford. And there is quite a few of them, including the Miss Jenkinses, two older spinster sisters who are the rector's daughters, although they are now themselves of advanced age. There is Miss Pole, who is probably the funniest of the Cranford ladies, a very opinionated woman, Mrs. Forrester, who's a widow, and of course the queen bee of the group, Mrs. Jameson, also a widow, and someone who comes from a vaguely aristocratic family. So you've got this society of women who have their own very specific social code, and it is something that isn't immediately obvious to the casual observer. But for someone who's acquainted with the Cranford ladies, like our narrator is, she gives us an insight into what this strange women-led society is all about. And it is something that you might recognize from your own life if you are familiar with a circle of older ladies. Things like decorum being placed above everything else. The Cranford ladies, though nominally upper class, none of them are particularly wealthy, and it's no secret in the book that the lack of wealth comes from the lack of men. Very few of the women that we meet in this book are married, although some of them are widowed. And so economy is something that is really a big part of the Cranford ladies' lives. They have to make do with what they have, while still attempting to play the part of the aristocratic upper class, the sort of genteel classes that don't need to work. And, some of the ladies are more successful at this than others, but it has led to a sort of understanding between them that they don't talk about money, obviously, but even things that would normally be remarked upon go unremarked. Like, for example, the Cranford ladies don't like to buy new dresses because dresses are expensive, but of course they don't say that. Instead, they just buy new bonnets when there is a new fashion, and then they talk about those bonnets, and they act as if that is the completely normal thing to do, and that only, that buying dresses would be too flashy or too unseemly or impolite. And, that sort of philosophy carries through to all of their interactions. They only light one candle because it would be gauche to light two candles at the same time. They only have small meals because it would be horribly improper to have a large meal at a party, and so on and so forth. So you get this society that operates on these really absurd and very specific rules. And the stories in the novel Cranford are all, set within that society, although some of the stories are reminiscences about past events. So the narrator, Mary Smith, goes on visits to Cranford and then talks about what happens there, what's going on with Miss Mattie these days, or what is, the deal with the mysterious Captain Brown who's moved into the neighborhood, etc. So all of the stories are very domestic. They take place in the parlors, they take place in the gardens and in the shops of Cranford. And this gets us straight to one aspect why I really enjoyed this book, and that is the domesticity of it, the everydayness of it. If you are at all interested in what life was like in the 19th century, this is an excellent book to pick up on that. And because it is set in a small town, this book is not set in London, it's not set in an industrial city like some other novels of Elizabeth Gaskell were. It's also not set in a huge country manor house like all of your favourite and my favourite Victorian novels are. No, it's set in a small town, and it is set in a society that is close-knit but very much cares about appearances, which I can imagine would be quite typical for a small town at the time. So we get scenes of everyday life that I found absolutely delightful to read. We get scenes in shops. We get to witness, the process of buying clothes or buying tea. We get to witness process of preparing food and dining, but also social visits, what is talked about, events when they go to the theatre, what happens there, that one time when there is a mysterious magician appearing in the town, and that gets everyone quite excited. There is also more serious everyday occurrences, financial struggles. There is quite a dramatic sort of financial crash happening in the course of the book, and that is something that if you are my age or older, you will have witnessed yourself in your lifetime. There are festivities happening and casual visits. There is talk of preserving food and everyday life that maybe in some of the more exciting Victorian novels that you're familiar with, you don't get to see in that detail. A lot of talk of pets as well, which I really enjoyed. I like it when in domestic novels when dogs and cats make appearances, because it kind of reminds us of how Victorians really weren't that different from us in spoiling our pets. There is one scene in particular where a cat has eaten a valuable lace, I can't remember if it's a lace trim or lace shawl, this cat has eaten a piece of fabric. My cat would eat my entire wardrobe if I let her, and then the characters trying to get the fabric out of the cat again in various ways. It's just so many everyday things that make me just appreciate how connected we are to the people of the past, despite the 150 years that separate us. That's the everyday side of things that happen in Cranford. The other side is the tragedy, the drama, the big life events. People die in this book quite a lot, and often in dramatic ways. Like I said, reminds you of a soap opera more than anything. Especially in the first half of the book, as soon as you get used to a character, something's probably going to happen to them. There is also more sort of close to life tragedy happening, like child mortality, obviously was a huge part of everyday life in the 19th century, and it is treated with delicacy and respect in this book. There is talk of loss and regret, missed opportunity. There is some amount of romance in this book, although not in a Victorian romantic novel kind of a way. Love and romance and marriage specifically is something that happens to the ladies of Cranford, but often doesn't go their way, hence why the majority of them are single or widowed. while the Cranford ladies are these upper-class genteel women, we also get to know a huge amount of the middle and working classes of the village. The servants and maids, the shopkeepers, the apothecary, the doctor, etc. You really get an idea of a real society, of a real place, with real people and their interactions with each other. And that ultimately was why I loved reading Cranford. The tone of it as well is a mix of comedy and drama. The funny bits I found quite funny, definitely my sense of humor, and the tragic aspects are written in a style that befits that as well. So there is no making light of the dark sides of the book. And I think that's a balance that, especially in such a short novel, this is only just 200 pages long, it's really quite an impressive feat of writing. Plot-wise, you will have to let go of your preconceived notions of a novel. As I've said, this reads like episodes in a TV series, and one episode usually is between 2 and 3 chapters long, and then you get to the next story. Although there is a continuity there, and there are things that crop up in later chapters, as it were, that were mentioned or set up earlier. So it's not completely like a short story collection set in this one place. It does have a continuity throughout. Some of the plot lines are quite predictable, but others did surprise me. I don't normally think about plot in that way. I don't normally try and guess what's going to happen later on, but because I was actually buddy reading this novel with the lovely Jack from Spread Book Joy, I was voicing my thoughts as I was telling her about what I thought of the books, and we did do a reasonable amount of speculation, some of which we got right and some of which we got absolutely wrong. Overall, you cannot expect a sort of neat plot arc in this book, because that's just not how it was written. That's just not the concept of it. Nonetheless, I found this quite easy to get through. I found the style delightful, as I said, and I enjoyed reading about a society of women with their own problems, their own issues, and their own incredible ways of dealing with them, while still very much being, I want to say, constrained by their society, but it is them who defined the rules of their own society in a way, within obviously the larger context of Victorian Britain. Anyway, it's an extraordinary book about some extraordinary women. I very much enjoyed this, and I gave this 4 stars. If you are interested in this book based on my description, then definitely go for it, pick it up. I think you will be entertained and you will be delighted by it. If you like your fiction a little bit more unified, if you like your novels to be more like a modern novel, then this is probably not the book for you. But do let me know your opinion if you have read Cranford, what you made of it, and who your favourite Cranford lady is. I would have to say I'm torn between Miss Poole and Miss Mattie Jenkins. Miss Mattie Jenkins is the character who is probably most spoken about. She's the closest this book has to a main character, and she's absolutely lovely, but I do enjoy Miss Poole's opinions. Right, thank you for watching. Bye.